Next, from Olivet Nazarene University in Bourbonnais, the Wall Street Journal's Stephen Moore is joined by business leaders and conservative policy analysts on what was labeled as the Illinois Jobs Tour. We'll hear their prescription for fixing the state's economy, its pensions, and how to lower the state's growing debt. This runs about 1 hour and 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Chris Roebling, and it is a real privilege to join all of you here this afternoon. It's really terrific to see the efforts of Dr. Bowling and Olivet Nazarene University, one of the co-sponsors of today's event, blessed as they have been. I had the privilege of working with the university 30 years ago when I was with a congressman who represented Kankakee and Will counties and Iroquois County, and I made the observation to Dr. Bowling. At that time, I think all of Olivet Nazarene College, because in those days it was ONC, all of Olivet Nazarene College could fit right inside of this room. And so there have been many blessings since then, and there have been many successes since then, and I hope this afternoon's event is going to be one of those. I mentioned before the Illinois Family Taxpayer Foundation and the leadership of Jack Roeser. Jack's played a very unique role in Illinois politics, government, policy formation, and most of all, Illinois business. To capture those strands in his life story, I ask your attention to this video.
Jack Roeser is an engineer, inventor, entrepreneur, businessman, philanthropist, and political activist. Born in 1923, Roeser enlisted in the Army in 1942 and served during World War II as a corporal in the Engineer Battalion of Combat Engineers in the Pacific Theater. In 1948, he received his Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Illinois, graduating with honors. Roeser is chairman and founder of Auto Engineering in Carpentersville, Illinois, a vertically integrated company which manufactures electronic control and communication switches for aerospace, medical, and industrial uses since 1961. In 1988, he brought his son Tom Roeser in to head up the company. Under Tom's leadership, the company exploded in revenue and employees. In 2010, Otto had over 600 employees and annual sales of almost $100 million. Jack has over 50 patents in electrical, mechanical, machinery, and marine products. While others asked why, Jack asked, why not? Their secret to success has been producing high-quality products and rewarding good employees with profit-sharing, incentives, and an atmosphere second to none. Jack and Tom started Otto Homes in Carpentersville, purchasing foreclosed homes, dramatically renovating them, and selling them back at cost. This has greatly enhanced the community and empowered homeowners to invest in their homes and neighborhood. Jack Roeser is big on education, and over the years he has put his money where his mouth is. In the heart of Brownsville in Chicago, Jack has kept St. Elizabeth's alive simply because of the quality of education the children receive.
If you could walk into St. Elizabeth's with me and see those children, you would realize how important it is.
Jack Roeser is a competitive sailor. Of the many trophies his boat, the Janine, has won, the most prestigious is the Chicago Mackinac Cup, awarded in 1988 for winning the Chicago Yacht Club's 90th Chicago to Mackinac boat race. Jack still sails to this day, but most of his time is preoccupied as a political activist. He has founded Family Taxpayers Foundation, ChampionNews.net. He hosts the popular radio program Champion News Talk Radio and the Illinois Republican Renaissance PAC. And as best as we can tell, he's not done by a long shot. Jack Roeser continues to fight for quality politicians of integrity and character to carry the banner of the Republican platform in promoting smaller government that serves the people instead of itself. These groups promote freedom, smaller government, less taxes, and the free enterprise system that made America great. In Jack's lifetime, he has seen it all. 2 depressions, several wars, and lots of change. Through it all, he has demonstrated the power of the American spirit to dream, create, develop, build, and empower. That American spirit is the foundation he built his company upon, one of freedom, one of fearless determination to pursue and succeed. The American spirit of generosity and looking out for your fellow man, not out of compulsion, but out of compassion. It is also Jack's American spirit that causes him to fight against corruption and greed in politics today. Jack could be sipping pina coladas in Fiji. Instead, he has decided to make his last stand here in Illinois, to fight for those American ideals that made this nation great, to fight for business and companies who do the real job creating in this country, to fight against regulations that hamstring companies and cost trillions in compliance every year. Just as Otto is proof that manufacturing is still alive and well in America, the American spirit that pioneered this great country is alive and well in Jack Roeser.
Ladies and gentlemen, how about a big Kankakee County welcome for the chief sponsor of today's activity, Mr. Jack Roeser.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. 48 years ago, I was born to my little Irish mother here in Illinois. And I borrow Lincoln's phrase because it's a big going back. I've got a perspective of the 88 years of my life, much of it in business. Lincoln harked back to the founding days of our country. That's what he was talking about. And today, so many of our good citizens are getting busy. I'm talking about Tea Party people, the Republican Party, and the good people that still remain in it, and that are going to form a strong group that will reinforce, bring back that 47 years ago set of values that Lincoln was talking about. That's a very important thing. I'm not going to run on because we have a wonderful panel here that knows a lot about many of the facets of the problem of jobs and industry. All I'm going to say is I started my company that's manufacturing in Carpentersville, and we're doing all those things like stamping and machining and designing and all here in America, and we're successful. We sell internationally, and that's what can be done. But it was much easier starting it 50 years ago than what it would be today to try to start a company with all of the regulations. The amount of regulations we got, I would liken them to the 10,000 cuts of a socialist system being put on us bit by bit over the years. That is the thing that's harnessing the growth of jobs, holding them back. All these regulations go beyond any common sense. So we've got to eradicate those and bring leaders in to our state that can make it, again, the most powerful area in the whole world was the state of Illinois in 1948 when I started my first company. Not for myself, I didn't have the money, but a rich man backed me up in the thing. And I learned from reading Sales Magazine and such of the remarkable wealth and power that lay in the farmland and the factories of the state of Illinois. And we need to get back to that. So I leave you to our beautiful panel, and I've had to have the privilege of introducing Stephen Moore from the remarkable newspaper that is, where's Stephen? He's down here. Here we are. Steve, come on. The man from the Wall Street Journal.
Good afternoon, folks. It is such a privilege to be here with you. Thank you so much for turning out. I know you all have busy lives, and it means a lot to me, and I think all of us, that you took time out of your schedules to be here today to talk a little bit about how we can fix Washington and how we can fix this great state of Illinois. Look, here's my view to really boil this down to some short points. I believe that since this recession hit in 2008, virtually everything that we have done in Washington, without exception, almost every single step that the Washington politicians have taken, George Bush and now Barack Obama, every step has been exactly the wrong thing to do, right? Every step has been the exact wrong thing to do. And to give you a sense of how bad things are, in the last 3 years, since the end of 2008 till today, in 3 years' time, we have increased the national debt by $4 trillion. That's an incredible figure, isn't it? $4 trillion. You know, there's a saying in Washington now that a trillion is the new billion, and it really is true. I mean, anybody know how many zeros there are in a trillion? There are 12 zeros in a trillion. $1 trillion is $1 million, and these numbers have gotten so gigantic, it's hard to even comprehend them. But to give you a sense of the path that we're on, you know, I mentioned that we borrowed $4 trillion. If we stayed on the path that we're on under the Obama baseline, over the next 10 years, we will borrow another $8 to $10 trillion on top of that. $8 to $10 trillion. That means we will borrow more money over the next 10 years than the United States government borrowed from 1776 through the year 2000. Isn't that amazing? We will, adjusted for inflation. That means we'll borrow more money in the next 10 years than we did to finance the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, and the Great Depression. Those are frightening numbers, aren't they? And I really believe the reason people aren't even angrier than this is because the numbers are so big, right? I mean, by the way, how many of you are Tea Party members? Raise your hand. Thank you so much for what you do. I think you are the patriots. You're the people who really changed this country 2 years ago, and obviously we're going to have to change this country in November of 2012. But you know, I went to one of the Tea Party rallies that Glenn Beck had about 1.5 years ago in the nation's capital. I don't know how many of you came out for that, but I'll never forget, one guy had a great sign, and it said, "Thank God Barack Obama doesn't know what comes after $1 trillion." And I thought, yeah, thank God for that. But the numbers are gigantic. I mean, just to give you, one example. I have 3 kids. I have 3 boys, 2 teenagers who I do not like very much, and one 8-year-old who I'm very fond of. And so when I'm at home, I'm on the road a lot, but when I'm at home, I try to tell my 8-year-old son a bedtime story. And about a week or 2 ago, I thought I'd tell him a little something about the national debt, because after all, he's going to have to repay it, right? So I said, "David, do you know how much $1 trillion is?" And his eyes glazed over. So I said, "Well, David, who's the greatest basketball player in the world?" And he instantly said LeBron James. And so then I asked him, "Well, how much money does LeBron James?" And he knew that too. He knows that with his endorsements and his Miami Heat contract, that LeBron James makes $40 million a season. By the way, is this a great country or what, that you can make $40 million playing basketball? And so I posed this question to my son David, and I'll pose the same one to you. How many seasons do you think LeBron James would have to play basketball at $40 million a year to have $1 trillion? The answer is 25,000 seasons. So we're talking about an awesome amount of money. Now, the president, this is a good time to have this panel, because the president just announced yesterday that he's going to give a major speech tomorrow, another speech, right? And this time he is going to propose a major new millionaire tax, right? A millionaire tax. Now, folks, can't we start by cutting some spending? I mean, we have seen no spending cuts by the Republicans or the Democrats for the last 3 years, and all they talk about, right, in Washington is raising taxes. Now, look, they're calling this the Warren Buffett rule. You saw that because Warren Buffett's been running around the country saying he wants to pay more taxes. Folks, if he wants to pay taxes, why does he do it? Why doesn't he pay the more taxes that he wants to? Why does he have to raise taxes on everybody else? I think he is a tax hypocrite. This is a guy who actually has spent his whole career. I like Warren Buffett, but he hasn't gotten rich by paying more taxes than he should. He's actually used the tax code very effectively to make more money. We don't need more taxes on the rich. And by the way, when they say rich people, that is the oldest gambit in Washington, because you all know that anybody with a job is considered rich in Washington. You know that. And so let me just give you an example. The people in the highest 2 income tax brackets that are scheduled to go up under Mr. Obama's plan, guess what 65% of those people, these evil rich people, guess what 65% of those people do for a living? They own, operate, and invest in small businesses. Now, I always ask this question of my friend Robert Reich. You know, Robert Reich, he's about that tall. He's the economist from the Clinton administration. He just doesn't have his tray table in the upright and locked position on any of this stuff. But I always, all he ever talks about is jobs. We need more jobs. And of course we need more jobs. But I always say to him, and he's never had an answer to this in 3 years, they say, Bob, you keep saying you want more jobs. How are we going to get more jobs when you want to raise taxes on the very businesses that create the jobs? Because you all know that 70% of all new jobs in this economy come from the small business sector of our economy. By the way, just a show of hands, how many of you in this room are an owner, investor, or an operator of a small business? Raise your hand. That's amazing, isn't it? I mean, you all, first of all, I want to congratulate you. You people really, truly are the backbone of the U.S. economy. And I hate to tell you this, but Washington is coming after you. And that's what this whole tax soak the rich issue is all about. But the point I'm making is, let's talk about some of the spending programs in Washington. First of all, they say there's no waste to cut. Did you see, by the way, that when Barack Obama was elected, I just had a piece on this, that Barack Obama said, I'm going to go line by line, page by page through the budget to find the waste, and we're going to get rid of it? Anybody here in this room think he's done that? There's more waste than ever before. By the way, did you all see the story about this country, Solyndra? If you haven't followed this story, it is an amazing story. The U.S. government, you and me and all the people in this room, we gave a $500 million grant to a solar paneling company in California. Just by coincidence, the people who run the company were major contributors of Barack Obama. Guess what? 2 weeks ago, that company declared bankruptcy. It is not going to produce a single kilowatt of electricity, and the U.S. taxpayers are out $500 million. This is the kind of absolute ridiculous spending that is going on in Washington. On the taxes, let me just give you a few statistics on this because I feel it's so important. If you look at the top 1% today, anybody want to take a wild guess at what percentage of the income tax today the top 1% pay? Yeah, close to 40%. The top 10% pay 67% of the income tax. Now, here's the amazing thing. The bottom 50%, all Americans with an income below the median in the United States today, they pay only 3% of the income tax. And even more frightening than that, if you look at these statistics, what you find is that last year, according to the official IRS data, 45% of Americans who filled out a tax form, you know how much they paid in taxes? Zero. Now, I'm as anti-tax as anybody in this room. I don't want to see taxes go up. But I will say this, and tell me if you think I'm right about this. I think anybody who votes in this country should pay tax, right? Anybody who votes should help finance the government that they're voting for. And what we're getting towards, and I think this is a very frightening situation, and it's also true in the state of Illinois, but it's especially true on the federal level. What liberals are trying to do is put more and more of the tax burden on the backs of people like Jack Roeser and the people who create the jobs and create the wealth, and then they want over half of the people who don't have to pay anything, right? Because when you don't pay any tax, guess what? Government is free. It's free for you. So obviously people who don't pay any tax, they're all in favor of raising taxes if they don't pay any taxes, right? And it means that they want more government programs. They're going to want more and more and more government programs because they don't have to pay anything for it. And this is a serious deficiency in our tax system. Two last points, and then I want to turn it over to the other gentlemen and ladies on this panel. First, if you were to ask me what one thing could we do to turn around this economy and make this economy grow like crazy, I would say that the most important thing would be to adopt a flat tax. A 18% flat tax, no deductions, no carve-outs, no special interest loopholes. Let's just get that rate down to 18%, a postcard return, no special interest provisions in this. I mean, can you imagine how fast our economy would grow? Do you all remember when Steve Forbes ran on this idea back in 1996? I mean, he was ahead of his time, but the time has come to radically change our tax system. We would go overnight from being the highest tax country in the world to the lowest tax country. There'd be no double tax on capital gains. There'd be no double tax on dividends. There'd be no double tax on death tax, which, by the way, I would make the case to you the death tax is the most evil tax in the federal tax system, the death tax. I believe Steve Forbes had it right. Remember when he said, in America, there should be a policy of no taxation without respiration? I think he's exactly right about that one. So imagine that, though. No tax on saving and investment. You know, the problem in Washington, to put it very simply, is we tax virtue and we subsidize vice, right? Isn't that what we do? We tax virtue, we tax people who start a business or save and invest, and then we subsidize vice through programs like unemployment insurance and so on. And this flat tax would turn that whole process around. By the way, there is another idea that I would like to just present to you, because I want to see how many of you support this plan. There's another plan called the fair tax, and I think the fair tax deserves a fair hearing as well. How many of you have heard of the fair tax before? Raise your hand. For those of you who don't know this plan, it would be a national sales tax. So we would abolish our federal income tax, our federal corporate tax, our capital gains, dividend, death tax, and the payroll tax, and we'd replace it with about a 20% national sales tax that you would pay at the cash register. I found that to be a very mighty, appealing plan as well, and I want to do a quick poll in this room, because you guys, I think, are a really good sample of Americans and how you feel about these issues. If you had three options, the flat tax, the fair tax, which is the national sales tax, or the current system the way it is, how many of you like the flat tax? Raise your hand. What'd you say? Is that about half, would you say? Maybe a little over half. How many of you like the fair tax, the national sales tax? Maybe about a quarter of you. How many of you like the tax system just the way it is? Not a single person. By the way, I was giving this presentation a few weeks ago out in California. I asked this question to 400 people. In the back room, I said, who's for the current tax system? This guy's wildly waving his hand. I said, sir, what do you do for a living? He said, I'm a tax accountant. Of course he likes the tax system the way it is. So that's the thing we have to do in Washington. For Illinois, and this is something I've talked with Christina quite a bit, wouldn't it be wonderful if Illinois could abolish its personal income tax and its corporate income tax? There are 9 states today. There are 9 states today that have no personal income tax. I know when I go to Springfield or other state capitals and say you should get rid of your state personal income tax, and people start hyperventilating. The politicians, they can't imagine operating a state government without a personal income tax. Oh my God, how are we going to fund all these programs? And I say to them, look, folks, there are 9 states that do that already, right? States like Florida, Nevada, Texas, New Hampshire, Tennessee, Washington, South Dakota. These are states that are able to balance their budgets, fund their schools, fund their roads and bridges and court system without a personal income tax. And you know what's amazing? And Christina knows these statistics. Those states without a state income tax are booming. Texas is a great example. You've heard this with Rick Perry, right? Over the last 3 years, Texas has produced 43% of all the new jobs in the United States. Why do you think jobs are leaving places like Illinois and California and going to Texas? I would make the case to you it's taxes. Taxes are so high in Illinois, and now, Christina, are you number 1 in corporate income tax now, or 2? Or 3? You're close to number 1, right? You're headed to being number 1. That's not a race you want to be. You don't want to be number 1 in your corporate tax system. So in closing, first of all, thank you so much for being here. Members of the Tea Party community, businessmen and women, I'm just honored to be with you. We've got to change this country. And the last point I will make, and I just want to stress this because I feel so passionately about it. I believe that every generation in America has had a calling. And that's why, by the way, I'm so pleased there's so many students here. And when you think about it, it's really true, isn't it? There were the founding fathers, right? The colonialists who basically fought for our freedom and independence. That was their charge, and they gave their lives, their honor, and their sacred honor and their fortunes to win America's independence. And then there was the generation that rid this country of the evil of slavery in the mid-19th century. And then there was the generation that fought for World War I. Right? And then there was the generation, what we call the greatest generation, the generation that ended the Great Depression and fought against Hitler in Japan in World War II and ended that terrible Nazi regime. And then there was the generation that won the Cold War and defeated the evil empire, right? And people really did give their sacred honor and their lives and their fortunes to achieve these things. And I would make the case to you all, especially the young people, that I really believe the calling of your generation is to do something about this enormous national debt. Wouldn't you agree with me? This is our charge as a nation right now. We cannot compete on a global scale with China, in India, in Germany, in France, if we're borrowing $1.5 trillion a year. This is the most ugly chapter of what I call fiscal child abuse in American history, to be continuing to pass these costs on to future generations. So ladies and gentlemen, let's fight for the future of Illinois and fight for the future of our country by bringing spending down, by bringing debt down, and bringing taxing down. Thank you very much for being here.
You know, you can hear it many times, but never more compellingly or concisely or clearly than what you get from Steve Moore of the Wall Street Journal. He makes me want to run out and resubscribe to the Wall Street Journal. Ladies and gentlemen, all right. Steve has spoken about the panel, and we want to say we've really got an all-star lineup for you. Somebody standing right here, Bruce Rauner, an expert in new company formation and what it takes to get enterprises off the ground. We're joined today by Ed Murnane, who is the president of the Illinois Civil Justice League, and he'll talk to us about the need for legal reform here in Illinois. Bill Zettler is a very highly credentialed pension expert who's been focusing lately on the imbalances in the Illinois pension systems. And we're going to hear from Christina Rasmussen, the best-looking panelist, who is our executive vice president for the Illinois Policy Institute. Christina has the task of living in that crazy place we called Springfield and trying to bring some sanity to the madness of Mike Madigan, not to be partisan or political or personal. But ladies and gentlemen, let's get started with what it takes to create new jobs. A warm welcome for Mr. Bruce Rauner.
Just before I start, I'd like to say two notes of thanks. First, another round of applause, please, for Stephen Moore. Thank you for coming. Stephen's message, Stephen's columns in the papers, Stephen's messages on television and in events like this is the most important, insightful message that we can have to begin to turn our economy around. Thank you for coming to Illinois. Stephen knows full well that Illinois is a microcosm of what's going on the national basis. He knows that Illinois is suffering what's going on in Washington, only worse on a per capita basis. Our spending is out of control. The special interests have taken over our government. We need people like Stephen coming here and getting that message out. So Stephen, thank you for coming here. I'd also like to say, on a very personal note, I would like to say my own thank you to Jack Roeser. Jack is the most passionate, most articulate, most outspoken advocate for the founding principles of our nation that I've ever met in Illinois. He's an extraordinary individual. It's been a privilege. I'm so proud to know him as a friend and a partner. He embodies the American dream. He is all about limited government, low taxes, personal freedom, and personal responsibility. He's the most passionate, most wonderful advocate we can have here in Illinois. Jack, thank you for everything that you do. I'd like to say thank you, too, to each of you in this audience. If we're going to change our system, if we're going to turn our economy around and take our government back so that it's run for the benefit of all our citizens, not large government special interests, it's going to take citizens like you who come out, take the time, understand the issues, get into the detail, and then take your knowledge and turn it into action. That's what it's going to take. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to happen overnight, but we can get it done together. I'm here for one simple reason. I'm a business person. I'm a lifelong Illinois resident. I'm in the venture capital business. We've started and financed dozens of companies here in Illinois and around the nation. We've created thousands of new jobs, backing innovators, entrepreneurs around the United States. I've learned a lot of lessons over the last 30 years about what it takes to succeed and create jobs, and Illinois has completely lost its way. We have fallen off the track. We've lost our balance. We've become hostile to business. And we cannot allow that to continue to occur. We rank dead last or among the 5 worst states in terms of attractiveness to business and job creation. And it's all about the fact that the special interests who make their money from government control our political parties. Unfortunately, both parties. They dominate the Democratic Party, but they've bought their way into and have a huge voice in the Republican Party. And it's going to take individual citizens like you proactively deciding no more of that. We're going to take the state government back and run it for the benefit of the citizens, not the special interest groups that are looking out for themselves with your tax money coming into their pockets. It's going to take time. We can do it together. Let me give you 2 examples of what I think it's going to take to turn our economy around and take our state back. Here in Illinois, Jack referred to it earlier, we've become hostile to business. Businesses are regarded either as bad people who are greedy trying to make money, or as a piggy bank that's to be broken into and taken money away from it to fund projects. That's not what business is about. Business, the free enterprise system, entrepreneurs, innovators, business creators, that's the foundation of our prosperity. That's what's made us the greatest nation in the history of the world. We have to become pro-business in everything we do. We have to think about the innovators and the business entrepreneurs first in all of our policy positions we take as a state. One example, Jack mentioned red tape and regulation. Illinois is horrendous on its regulation of business. Its rules, its restrictions, its fees, its penalties, its charges, its paperwork. It's stunning. I've tried to get businesses to move to Illinois, and over the last 10 years, it's become harder and harder. They say, no, Bruce, Illinois is too rough. I want to go to Texas. I want to go to Tennessee. I want to go to Florida. We can't let that happen. Those other states are taking our jobs. We've got to change our attitudes and take our system back. One small example. Here in Illinois, those of you who follow the goings-on in Springfield, you've heard about the fight in this past year about workers' compensation. We have one of the highest cost, most broken workers' comp systems in the United States. It's extremely expensive to business. It's very punitive to employers. And the special interests in Springfield realized there was beginning to be a backlash against it, so they reformed our workers' comp system. What they did was dramatically lower the fees that doctors could charge and hospitals could charge for treating workers' comp patients. Okay, maybe some negotiation on fees was appropriate, but that's maybe less than a quarter of the problem. The problem is the system is broken. It's so complex, it's so easy for lawyers and unethical folks to take advantage of that our costs are astronomical. It's through the roof for insurers to deal with our system. The politicians in Springfield want you to think that they fixed it. They don't want to ever talk about workers' comp again. The reality is most employers in this state know that the system hasn't been fixed. It's still one of the most expensive in the country. And they don't want that we don't want to let the politicians get away with saying they fixed it and never discuss it again. It's going to take citizens like you getting informed about that, writing your legislators, talking to your legislators about it, and making sure that they follow through and actually truly do transform that system. Then another example, and maybe I would argue the most important thing all of us can do here in the state, that is our public schools, our public education system. In my opinion, there is nothing that we do collectively as a community that's more important than educating our children. There is absolutely nothing more important. That's our future. That's our prosperity, our children, our grandchildren. Today in Illinois, we used to historically, 20, 30, 40 years ago, we had a pretty good public school system. We've lost our way. The union bosses have taken over the system. They're running it for the benefit of teacher groups, frankly, for the weaker teachers. They're all about the vacation length and pension size and perks and benefits, and very much against evaluating teachers or holding teachers accountable. They're fighting in Springfield constantly to just keep the status quo. In Illinois, we have something called the ISAT, the Illinois Standardized Test to evaluate how our kids are doing. Most of you wouldn't know this, and this is where you're being here and learning about the detail can make a difference. The ISAT is one of the weakest, most low standardized tests in the United States, and it's been dummied down by the bureaucrats in Springfield 6 times over the last 10 years to make it appear that our students are doing better on a standardized test. They don't like to talk about that. They keep that quiet, but they're manipulating the system to make it seem like our kids are doing well. The reality is in 1950, 20% of our public school students went to college, and roughly 20% of the new job openings required a college degree. So we had some sort of a balance. Today, we're better. 1/3 of our public school children get a college degree. It's still kind of shameful that it's only 1/3. However, 80% of new job openings require a college degree. We're out of balance. We've completely lost our focus on what matters in education. We can change that, but it's going to take citizens like you demanding that kind of change. Entrepreneurs want it. They want to go to the states where the schools are outstanding, and because that's their workforce. And if we can change our schools and become the best in the nation rather than towards the bottom, that will allow us to bring the innovators to want to bring their companies here to employ our kids and our grandkids. Anyway, thank you for the time. Appreciate it. I'll turn the panel next over to Ed Murnane. He's going to talk a little about the challenges in our legal system here in Illinois.
Thank you very much, Bruce, and thank all of you for being here. And I have to make one brief comment about our sponsor and our host, Jack Roeser. I've known Jack for over 40 years, and I've learned that by acknowledging or by mentioning that to audiences, it always enhances my credibility. Because Jack has been such a pillar in the business community and the fairness community in Illinois that anybody who has been associated with him in any way generally improves themselves because some of Jack Roeser wears off on him. And I appreciate everything that Jack has lent me and let me steal and borrow from him. I'm the president of the Illinois Civil Justice League. We're a tort reform organization. We're a legal reform organization. And it's not always easy to make the connection between judicial and legal reform and job creation, except when you consider that the cost of the judicial system and the present tort system in Illinois is a burden, a huge burden on the business community. It's a burden on the medical community, and it's a burden on families, and thus it does play a major role. It is a major factor in the economy of our state and the economy of most other states, but none are as bad as Illinois. Illinois consistently ranks in the bottom 5 in surveys conducted by the United States Chamber of Commerce, by the American Tort Reform Association, by the Civil Justice Reform Group, and that's because of the as a result of the annual evaluations they do. And the bottom line conclusion is that a healthy economy, as we are hearing today, usually, logically, is a prerequisite for job creation, which is what we're interested in. And if you look at the impact of a out-of-control legal system, you spotlight Illinois. Look at just in the last few months. We've had 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 states that we don't know, or companies that we don't know about, that have made noises about moving away from Illinois because of the high cost of government, because of the high cost of taxes, because of the restrictive policies that our state has. In every one of these situations, and 3 that we all have heard about, and there are many others that have not been mentioned yet, are Caterpillar, our Sears, and our Motorola. We know there have been major changes going along in those states, and each one of those states has been a very active and a very strong member of the Illinois Civil Justice League and the American Tort Reform Association and the Civil Justice Reform Group, because they are trying to bring about changes in the legal system in Illinois. And it's because our legal system is hostile to the business environment in the state, and we need to improve it, and we need to work for it. And while their staying in Illinois does not necessarily create jobs, I can assure you that their departure would reduce jobs, would eliminate jobs. Think of what it would mean if Caterpillar did decide it was going to move out of Illinois. If State Farm, which has made some noises, did decide to move out of Illinois. If Sears, which has been talking about it, did decide to move out of Illinois. And the situation would be such that jobs would go, and they wouldn't go overnight, but there would be fewer jobs for our children, for our grandchildren, and it would be a serious problem for an already terrible economy in Illinois. Money spent on insurance as a result of lawsuits in Illinois is overwhelming, and not because, as some would suggest, that insurance companies are gouging. The cost of medical care continues to increase in our state at a time when new discoveries, new treatments, and greater healthcare awareness should be lowering the cost of medical care, but the opposite is happening. In part, that's because medical practitioners, including doctors, hospitals, and other practitioners, take extra steps to prevent the threat of costly lawsuits, which we have on an ongoing basis in the state of Illinois. And in part, that's because when they face these lawsuits, they have to pay for them whether the lawsuits are justifiable or not. In some areas of our state, one in particular, which is the most hostile to the business community and the most hostile to the healthcare community, down in southern Illinois, just across the river from St. Louis, the counties of Madison and St. Clair. We have conducted surveys, and they've been verified by other, including local organizations down there, that have showed that more than 70% of the doctors 70% of the doctors in those communities have faced a medical malpractice lawsuit by the local trial lawyer community. Now, 70% have been sued, but about 10% have actually been found at fault, actually found responsible. But those who have been sued and have not have had to pay the cost, have cut the quality and the quantity of the service that they offer. And that's because Madison and St. Clair counties and others in Illinois, including Cook County, Kankakee is not as bad. Kankakee is not a real problem right now in this area, but Illinois is a real problem, and Kankakee, as a member of the Illinois business community, is facing this problem. Doctors are being sued. Lawyers are getting a break from the local governments. Lawyers are being elected on a strongly political basis, and the local community doesn't know who the judges. I said lawyers are being elected, I meant judges are being elected. The local community doesn't know who the judges are and why they're being selected. Some of you probably know that in Illinois we have 59 state senators and 118 members of the Illinois House, 177 state legislators. And we know probably the name of our locals and maybe the state senator and the state representative from the district on this side of us and the district on that side of us. And it's an easy number, an easy figure to manage. But very few of us realize that we have 990 judges, elected judges in the state of Illinois. And when you consider the authority that judges have and the lack of knowledge that people have as to who these judges are and how they're elected and how long their terms are and what they can do, it's tragic for the future of our country and our state's economy. I would bet that and I've made this challenge on many times before, and I've always been successful. 1 or 2 times I've not. I would bet there are not 4 people in this room who could identify for me the 7 members of the Illinois Supreme Court. And there aren't. And we were at a function like this 2 months ago, and somebody raised their hand, and it was a trial lawyer. And yeah, he knows who they are. It pays for them to know. But the fact is, we have 7 judges who serve on our Supreme Court. They serve for 10 years, and they can do pretty much what they want to do, and nobody knows who they are or what they're doing until there's some kind of a scandal. And we do have our share of scandals involving the judicial community. Well, my point is this: the judiciary in Illinois, at the local level where we elect circuit court judges, or at the regional level where we elect appellate judges, or at the Supreme Court level where we elect people for 10-year terms to make rules, make policies, establish policies for us, needs to be reformed. And there are many tort reform proposals and programs that have been offered in the Illinois legislature. And it is, if we are serious about improving the Illinois economy and improving the job environment in Illinois, we have to have a legal community that does not get in our way, is not hampering us, and a legal community that is not trying to rob the business community, the medical community, or a lot of us, the insurance community, to rob them in a way that is unfair and has a very adverse impact on all of us. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all and to listen to Stephen Moore once again. And I'm happy to turn the program over now to Bill Zettler, who is a pension expert. If you can survive the lawsuit environment in Illinois, at some point you may be able to enjoy, hopefully, the pension that you are looking forward to.
Sometimes being a pension expert can be awkward. On Friday, when I was in my office working on this outline for today, I walk into the men's room, and Aaron, who has the office right next to me, stops me, puts his hand on my shoulder, and says, "Bill, how bad is this pension thing?" That gives you an idea. If the guy in the men's room is worried about the pension system, then we've made progress. And his question is valid. How big is the problem? Well, it's really impossible to tell. There's no fixed number. The official number from the politicians and from the union is $85 billion unfunded. Now, unfunded is not what we owe. We actually owe $136 billion for pensions, but we got $51 billion in the bank. So the difference, the $85 billion, which is thrown out all the time, is the amount we don't have in the bank that we should have in the bank. Now, Professor Joshua Rau from Northwestern University has estimated that our unfunded may be as high as $200 billion, an impossible number. But let's just work with the official political number, $85 billion of unfunded liability. So I have two questions for you to ask your political representative next time you see them. Number one, Mr. Politician, how long will it be before that unfunded liability is under $85 billion, is less than $85 billion? He won't know the answer, but you will. 2042. The unfunded liability is not going down, folks. It's going up for decades. Best case scenario. So it's not going to be below $85 billion until 2042. Mr. Politician, how many tax dollars are going to go into the pension system before our unfunded liability is less than $85 billion? He won't know that answer either. $365 billion taxpayer dollars before it goes down in 2042. It's insanity. It can't be done. And these are best case scenarios, folks. So, we know that there's a big problem in the pensions. What is the source of the problems? I've identified 4 of them that are easy to understand. First of all, salaries in Illinois are too high. Let me give you a simple example. The top teacher salaries for the last 3 years. In 2008, it was an art teacher, $196,000 a year. In 2009, it was a music teacher, $189,000 a year. In 2010, it was a phys ed teacher, $191,000 a year. We're paying teachers of non-academic subjects, you notice, more than $20,000 a month to teach in our schools. Again, that's insanity. And they're not alone. There's 14,000 teachers, 14,000 K-12 employees who make more than $100,000 a year. Out of that 14,000, 6,500 are teachers. They're working 9 months a year. They're making over $100,000 a year. How out of whack is that? Let's look at our friends to the north, Wisconsin. Who can forget the beating tom-toms, the red T-shirts, the protest marches? That was something to watch. So Illinois has 6,500 teachers making over $100,000. How many does Wisconsin have with all their teacher problems? Exactly 1. 6,500 in Illinois, 1 in Wisconsin. That's the problem. And it's not just teachers, though they're the biggest part of the problem because they're 60% of the pension cost are K-12 teachers, 80% K through university. State troopers. There's 2,000 certified state troopers in Illinois. Over 35% of those people make over $100,000 a year. So if you get stopped on the way home for speeding, he could be making $100 grand. All right, that's the salary. So what happens when you have these enormous salaries? You have enormous pensions because in Illinois, pensions are a direct percentage of salaries. 75 to 85% of your salary becomes the pension. So let's take our $189,000 a year music teacher from 2009. He retired at age 54 after 33 years of work. I don't think 33 years is a career. Jack Roeser's career is 70 years. That's a career. 33 years is not a career. So he's 54, he's worked 33 years, he retires on a pension of $130,000 a year. Over his expected lifetime, along with the 3% COLA, which is built into the pension system, he will collect over $6 million, We're paying $6 million in retirement payments for a music teacher. That's why we're broke. Let's take his peer on Social Security. Makes the same amount of money. Retires at 62. What's the most he can get at 62? $22,000 a year. Over his expected lifetime, he'll collect $700,000 in Social Security benefits. So his peer makes 1/8 as much as a music teacher made. And he's not alone, of course. There's over 5,000 state retirees with pensions over $100,000, and by 2020, I've done a projection, there's going to be over 25,000 state employees with pensions over $100,000 a year. Problem number 3, their contributions are too low. I mean, this guy's pulling down $130,000 a year at age 54. He should be paying in huge dollars. He's not. Over his career, he would have paid in about 7.2% of his salary into his pension. That compares to Social Security, as most of you know, of 6.2%. So he pays a little bit more. But he's getting $6 million out of the system. Overall, all the pension systems together, the average is about 7%. So the contributions are much too low. Number 4, the retirement's too early. State troopers can retire at age 50 after 27 years of work. In 2009, 13 of them retired at age 50 with pensions over $100,000 a year, state troopers. They'll collect over $5 million over their lifetime. In fact, they'll be retired much longer than they worked. So those are the 4 problems. Salaries too high, pensions too high, contributions too low, and retirement too early. So what do we do about that? How do we solve this problem? Retire the pension system. Retire Illinois' pension system. The pension system is a political tool. It's a part of the Department of Insurance. There's 700,000 people involved. The politicians want their votes. If you vote for me, I'll make sure you get your pension. And we know which party, well, both of them actually now in Illinois are contributing to that. So the answer is 401ks. They're called 401bs for public employees, but the same thing. So think 401ks. Tom Cross has a bill now that he's submitted that's being maneuvered down in Springfield right now. It's called Senate Bill 512. It has 3 options for employees, current workers. Nothing about people who are already retired. That's a very difficult legal issue. So option number 1, stay in the current system and pay a little bit more in your contributions, about 5% on the average. Move to last year's system, you know, the new one for new employees, where you can't retire till 65, but you don't have to pay any more money. Number 3, the state puts in 6%, the employee puts in 6% or more than 6%, up to the limit of 401ks. Get rid of the first 2 options. If we do option number 3, 6% 401ks, the problem is solved. The problem is solved. We put 2 other tweaks in there. The school districts pay their own pensions. They don't pay it now. The state pays the pension for these huge teacher salaries. The schools, the K-12 would pay their own pension. Salaries would be limited to 3% increases, otherwise somebody else would have to pay the 6% that we kick in. And the COLAs are eliminated. That saves us $200 billion over the next 35 years. That'll save us $2 billion on next year's pension payment. 401ks solves the problem. Thank you.
As you know, Illinois has spent too many years spending far beyond what it has available in resources. Our state government has developed a reputation for being inefficient, and lawmakers have refused to make the reforms needed to our big-ticket items, pensions, Medicaid, the decisions that will put us back on the path to prosperity. And now the state is running recurrent annual deficits in the billions of dollars. Now, I took up John's challenge and I made Springfield my home, and I arrived in town just as newly minted Governor Pat Quinn was announcing his first attempt to increase the state income tax by a stunning 50%. Remember, this was still in the depths of the recession and jobs were disappearing at an alarming rate. So I walked over to the State House, which is just 3 blocks from our office, and I started talking with legislators about how raising the price of doing business and living in Illinois would not help job creation. And I have to tell you, a lot of them, including conservatives, Republicans, told me, Christina, don't bother. You're going to lose. This tax hike is a done deal. Roll over, give up, spend your time on something else. And we said no. We decided to fight, and fight we did. For the last 3 years, the Institute has issued a line-by-line alternative budget that showed how you could, in fact, balance the budget without a tax increase and still fund core services. By getting rid of low-priority programs like free college tuition for unionized state employees and tackling the big-ticket items like Medicaid, refocusing them on the truly poor and destitute, and then using market incentives to bring down those costs, the budget bleeding would stop. And I am so proud to say that in 2009, when Quinn's tax hike went up for a vote, it failed. And in 2010, he didn't even bother to bring it up for a vote because everyone knew it was going to fail. This saved taxpayers, it saved you over $8 billion. Now, this January, in the final early morning hours of the last General Assembly, they voted on that tax hike, and it did pass, with the barest of majorities receiving only Democratic votes, including the vote of practically every legislator who was retiring and who had just lost at the ballot box past November. Governor Quinn and the majority party increased your income tax from 3% to 5% and increased the business tax from 4.8% to 7%. Steve, with our personal property replacement tax, we have one of the highest corporate income taxes in the nation. It also suspended the ability of businesses to write off some of their losses on their taxes, and that is a very painful thing to have happened in the middle of a recession. So what does this mean for you? The average family will see $1,500 less in their paycheck over the course of a year. That is nearly equal to what the average family will spend on clothing, for example. Another way to look at this is how much time you spend every day trying to pay off your taxes. Prior to the tax hike, you spent about 58 minutes of every working day working just to pay your state and local tax burden. Now, after this tax hike, it's 67 minutes you spend every day paying state and local government. And over the course of the year, this adds up to a week. You are working a week more for the folks in Springfield instead of for your family. So Quinn and his legislative allies have more of our money. What are they doing with it? They are spending it at record rates. And following the close of this spring session, a lot of newspapers reported that, hey, they actually cut spending a little bit. Well, it's baloney. They actually increased spending by hiding over $1 billion in new spending. They did this trick where they extended the payment cycle for Medicaid, so we're going to incur the costs this year, but pay it off next year, and somehow that is cutting spending. What are they spending this money on? County fairs, art grants, paid government internships. When I was an intern, it was unpaid. And that's just the little stuff. Based on these current trends, by the end of the decade, we could have a cumulative deficit of over $25 billion. And unless significant spending reductions are made, we are setting up a road paved to ruin, paved with higher taxes. And we need really a road to prosperity where taxes are manageable and businesses are not threatening to leave the state. And it's not part of our daily life where we hear news reports of businesses going out in Indiana, going elsewhere because there are better opportunities there. At the outset of my remarks, I told you how I moved to Illinois. Well, on my way in, I saw a lot of people heading in the other direction. In fact, between 1991 and 2009, we lost one resident every 10 minutes. Well, we've been talking here today, a couple more families have gone. And where have they gone to? States like Florida, Indiana, Arizona, and Texas. And they're taking their money with them. Between 1995 and 2009, the total net income leaving the state averaged over $1.8 billion. You add that up and we're talking about a loss of $23.5 billion. Had this income stayed in Illinois, state and local governments would have taken in an additional $2.5 billion in revenue. You want a thriving public sector, you need a thriving private sector. People are moving to states with lower taxes, lower union membership, low in population density, low in housing costs, and yes, warmer weather. They're going where the jobs are. In July, Illinois lost the most jobs in the nation. Just last month, in August, more people became unemployed in Illinois than any other state in this great country. There are 653,000 Illinoisans who do not have a job. You may be one of them. You may have a family member who's one of them, or a friend. We need jobs to turn this state around, yes. And nationwide data, and Steve has done a lot of research on this, shows that the jobs and the people, our wealth, are flowing to states that don't tax virtue, that allow people who work hard to keep what they earn and reinvest it in their businesses. Passing large tax increases, like Governor Quinn and the majority party did, are driving people out when we should be emulating the low tax choices of other states. Now, our approach at the Institute is to transform liberty principles into marketable policies that become law. And the ultimate sign of success, what we measure ourselves with, is turning those ideas into law. What does this look like? Individuals and businesses become more prosperous without the fear of government interference or favoritism. Families can choose a high quality of education for their children, and citizens respect their government because it is open to all. I'd encourage you to visit our website, illinoispolicy.org, to learn more about the specific policies behind these ideas. You'll find more information on how to ensure that government doesn't spend more and grow faster than we're able to afford it, how right-sizing public employee compensation, like Bill referenced, can lead to balanced budgets, how market-driven healthcare initiatives can expand access and lower costs, how opening the books at the local and state level can transform citizen involvement, and how opportunity scholarships can empower parents and children, especially parents in the worst public schools in this state. But really, I think our #1 policy priority must be repealing that tax hike. Now, it would be nice to put that $1,500 back in your pockets, but I think the really important thing is the message it sends to the rest of the country. Yes, Illinois is open again for business. And repealing the tax hike, I think, can send a strong message. So I'm going to ask you to do 3 things today. The first thing I'd like you to do is to visit repealthetaxhike.com. Thousands have signed a pledge asking legislators to roll back that tax hike. Now, there are a lot of petitions out there, and it's always good to contact your legislators through whatever means possible. But I'm making you a promise today that if you sign that pledge, I will personally deliver it to the State House to make sure that your voice is heard, because I can tell you, I'm there every day, the unions are there, they are agitating, they are organizing, the trial lawyers are there, and if you're not there, your voice is not going to be heard. Next, at repealthetaxhike.com, you're going to find a very simple candidate pledge. It says essentially, I'm going to work to repeal that tax hike and not replace it with anything else. We're in primary season soon. At your local forums, stand up and ask every candidate, Democrat or Republican, to sign this pledge. There is no good policy reason for them not to sign that pledge. And if they won't do it, it should tell you something. Finally, this is a general request. Arm yourself with information. I can tell you that you will be a more effective advocate when you know the facts and you can tell your personal story with those facts. Outside on our table, we've got lots of information. Our Piglet report, which talks about specific instances of wasteful government spending. You'll definitely want to turn to the page where we talk about $6,500 of your money spent by the state on a tub full of fish. You'll also have our legislative vote card. Not all of us focus on state issues. Sometimes we're more focused on what's happening in Washington, D.C. I am up in the gallery at the State House watching the votes, and we've highlighted, how is your representative? Are they representing you, or are they going with the special interests? You'll also find our Legislator's Guide to the Issue, a thick book on some free market solutions, as well as a turnaround tour platform, which talks about the specific ideas to turn the state around. I told you that I made Illinois my home a few years ago. This January, I welcomed twin girls into the world, and you could say that I doubled down on Illinois. My children, your grandchildren deserve better than what they're getting. This past May, we asked voters of Illinois in a scientific poll, when the time comes, when young people enter the market, will they find their ideal job in Illinois, or will they have to go elsewhere? Only 1 in 3 said that our young people could find their job here in Illinois. 3 out of 5 said they would have to go elsewhere. We can offer them a brighter future. Illinois can be first in economic job creation and outlook, And we can be the free enterprise leader of the nation. A few years from now, I want Steve going around the country talking not about Texas, not about Indiana. I want him talking about Illinois, and we can get there. We can do it by changing policy, and we change policy because policy changes lives. Legislation that lowers the cost of living and doing business in this great state makes life better for everybody. Legislation that gives children the opportunity to pick the best education for them will transform their futures and their communities. By getting involved, getting informed, you too can change hearts, minds, and laws. We can promote personal freedom in Illinois, along with prosperity in America. Thank you so much.
Terrific, isn't that terrific? Let's hear it for all four of our panelists. So let's jump right into the questions. I've got one from a student. Ashley Sarver identifies herself as a freshman political science major. Steve, she asks, will lowering taxes ultimately create a better economy?
Is that a trick question?
I think Ashley is asking straight up there. She wants to hear from the source.
We've got a lot of things we have to do. My view is we have to fix almost all the institutions in Washington that are broken. Almost nothing in Washington works the way it should be. Bruce mentioned our school system, which is just totally inadequate. Our tax system has to be completely put into the shredder and started over. We need to have, by the way, we need more tax revenues, right? I mean, we're going to have to increase revenues, but the way to do that is grow the economy. Grow the economy, put more people back to work, have more businesses, have more millionaires and billionaires. If you do that, you're going to see a huge surge in revenues. Just one statistic on this that I find most fascinating. When Ronald Reagan entered the White House in 1980, the highest income tax rate in the United States was 70%. Remember that, Bruce? We had a 70% tax rate. When he left the White House, the highest income tax rate was not 70%, it was all the way down to 28%. Now, here's the amazing thing. Here's your quiz question for today. Do you think over that period the tax revenues went up or down? How many think they went up? How many think they went down? You had it right. Not only did they go up, tax revenues doubled from $500 billion to $1 trillion with the lower tax rates. There is something called a Laffer curve effect, that when you lower tax rates, you get more growth, you get more energy in the economy, you get more businesses, and that's what we need to do right now. We've got to get America working again. And I'm not saying tax cuts are the only way to do it, but I do think it's a precondition to getting the economy moving again.
Thank you very much, Steve. I want to ask, we're going to go down now to Bill, because this person asks a very serious question. What event is it going to take for the American public to decide that there is a real problem on our hands and that we need to do something about it right now? And speak about the Illinois public as well and the problem that you described.
It's a political problem, like everything else in Illinois. We need to get politicians in there that understand that this is unsustainable and it has to be changed. Like I said today, there is a solution. The solution is in a bill sitting on a desk in Springfield right now. They take 2 paragraphs out of it, leave the 401k paragraph, and Illinois has solved its pension problem for 35 years. It can be done.
Can I say something about that with respect to Washington?
Please do.
Look, how many signs do we need, right, that something is terrible amiss before we fix these things? I mean, you're all following what's happening in Greece, where the interest rates on their debt have gone, what, from 5 to 18% or something like that. You know, nobody wants to buy Greek debt. I always say this is a signal. What's happening in Europe, folks, is like a signal from God that this is what happens to countries that get a debt problem. Then we had the downgrading of our debt for the first time in American history. I mean, aren't the alarms going off? Why aren't the alarms going off in Washington? We've got to get this spending under control. Then we had an earthquake, we had hurricanes. I mean, what do we need for Washington, for God to tell America, we've got to get this debt under control? So I think we had the biggest financial crisis since the Great Depression, and it was because of too much government spending and government debt, and too much government insuring all of the mortgages and so on. I'm so frustrated right now because I feel like, what other signs do we need for the politicians to pay attention? That's why I'm so proud of you all as Tea Party people. You changed this country with what you did in the November 2010 elections. You know what, though? I still don't think the politicians are listening. I think we need to have another landslide election.
All right. Ed Murnane, I have a question for you. Anticipating your presentation, somebody asked, who elects these judges and where do I go to find out more about who is running for judge?
You elect the judges. If you're a voter in Illinois, you elect your Supreme Court justices, you elect the people at the trial court. Every 2 years, they're on the ballot. Next November, there are 172 judges who, as of today, some may decide to retire, but 172 judges who are going to be on the ballot next year. We have 2 Supreme Court elections in Illinois next year. Very significant, 2 out of the 7. One of them, we had a Supreme Court election. Some of you may have heard about it in this district last year. You would not have been able to avoid getting something in the mail maybe 2 or 3 times a day during the course of that campaign last year, but not everybody responded and not everybody did what needed to be done. But we elect them as voters. We elect them at the local level. The circuit court judges are generally elected in a small area that may be the size of your legislative district or the size of your county. And we have 5 Supreme Court districts, or Supreme and Appellate Court districts, and the judges are elected there. So that's how, and there are ways that you can learn. Some, not all, of the newspapers do a decent job of paying attention to judicial elections. We focus almost exclusively on that, and we have a website, www.illinoisjudges.net, that you can learn all about the judicial candidates in your district as well as the rest of the state. But unfortunately, these elections take place in the shadow of all the other national elections. Those 2 Supreme Court elections that we'll have in Illinois next November will be held at the same time as the election for president, as the election for members of Congress, as the election for the state senators and the state legislators and so forth. So you do have to work a little bit to learn. But the information is there, and there are organizations like ours, and I know the Illinois Taxpayer Institute and the Illinois Chamber of Commerce and others try to help. We focus exclusively on it, but it's up to the voters to try to learn what they can.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Ed. Bruce Rauner, a question that relates to job creators and the influence on them of increasing taxes. So we have now, Steve mentioned, the president's anticipated proposal for the so-called millionaire's tax. And what impact do taxes like that have on the job creators whose enterprises you help get up and running?
Unfortunately, tax policy has a huge impact on entrepreneurs and business builders. They are looking for many factors when they make a decision on where to locate their businesses and where to have their personal residences. And they're flexible. Entrepreneurs can move anywhere in the country. Their capital can follow them. Investors' dollars flow to where the opportunities and where the great entrepreneurs are. And the reality is states that have high taxes put themselves at a huge competitive disadvantage relative to other states. And everything we do in our state policy needs to be around making sure we stay competitive, that we're an attractive place for business builders, entrepreneurs, innovators, to locate. Now, tax policy is not 100%. There are many factors that go in: the quality of life, the quality of the education system and the universities, the talent of the workforce, and overall cost of living and quality of life. All are factors for an entrepreneur in making a decision. But frankly, the tax costs are one of the major components of their ultimate decision.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Christina, a question for you emanating out of Springfield. It connects with Bill's subject matter. What do our legislators pay for their pensions? How long do they work to get vested, and what type of pension do they receive? And does this incentivize them to reform pensions for the rest of the state in accordance with what Bill discussed?
It's a great question. The state has 5 retirement systems, one of them being the Illinois General Assembly retirement system. So they are enrolled in a defined benefit pension plan just as teachers or state employees would be, and it's also unfunded. State legislators, we did a survey last year of all state legislators across the country. Illinois, they have the 5th highest legislators based on their base salary, and I can tell you that few legislators actually make that base salary because you get a chairmanship or some other leadership title and it gives you a couple bumps up. So they make very good money, and they will make that in retirement. One of the questions that came up this spring when pension reform started to get debated in all seriousness was the judges' pension system. The judges also receive a defined benefit plan, and they actually talked about carving judges out of the reform because they were worried if they kept the judges in, well, who would be deciding if this change was constitutional? The judges. And they would have an incentive to strike down changes that would give them a less generous system. So the answer is yes, they receive a pension. It's too high compared to a market analysis of their fellow legislative peers. It's unfunded, and it needs to be changed as well.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Christina. Thank you all. We've got 2 more very insightful comments for you to hear, so stick with us. Right now, a few concluding remarks from Steve Moore, and we'll be back to introduce John Tillman. Steve, come on back and give us a few summation ideas here. Thank you.
What is the goose that lays the golden eggs? You know, I ask this of politicians all the time. Why is it the United States is the wealthiest country in the history of mankind? The answer, of course, is our free enterprise system, right? I think, does everyone agree with that? It's our free enterprise system that creates the jobs and creates the growth. And it's entrepreneurs like the great Jack Roeser and what Bruce Rauner does every day, and so many of the people here. This free enterprise system is under assault in Washington, and it's certainly under assault in Springfield. And I guess my message is very simple. We have got to stop the spending. We've got to stop the debt. We've got to stop the overtaxation. And we all have to be missionaries for this purpose because the left is engaged right now. The one thing that I find that's very different about we as free market conservatives versus the left is we donate our time and our energies and our money, and the American people are incredibly generous in terms of providing funding and volunteer time to try to change the country. The left doesn't need that, right? They don't need people to make charitable contributions to their effort because all of what the left does, virtually all of it, is funded by government. Right? The unions, when the president says he wants to create 1 million new construction jobs with his infrastructure bank, I don't know how many of you are aware of that, but because of federal rules, virtually all of those, quote, million new workers will be AFL-CIO members. If we were to pass that bill, it would put $1 billion into the coffers of the union. So, of course, the unions want that bill. And, of course, what are they going to use that money for? And they're going to use it to elect more politicians that are in favor of what they're trying to do. If there's nothing else that you come away from this in terms of what I've said about Washington, I hope that everybody understands, especially the young people, because as you take economics, and I know you have a more free enterprise economics department here than most schools. I went to University of Illinois. It was totally Keynesian back 25 years ago. But it's a very simple message. The government does not create jobs. Governments do not create jobs. The greatest economist of the 20th century was Milton Friedman, in my opinion, the great economist from the University of Chicago. And Milton was famous for many things, right? But I believe his most important insight, the one that really sticks out to me as really encapsulating what's wrong with government, is remember this one? He said, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. What did that mean? It meant when the government spends a dollar, the dollar has to come from somewhere, right? And where does that dollar come from? Before the federal government, right, people are waving their hand from your wallet and my wallet and Bruce's wallet and Christina's wallet and so on. The government can only spend a dollar when it takes a dollar from us. Right? Does that make sense? So there's no multiplier effect from the government spending money because they took it from us from the first place. The government is richer and the private sector is poor. And by the way, this is obviously a theory, but look at what happened when we did this gargantuan $830 billion spending bill, which I think that stimulus bill was the biggest waste of money in the history of Washington, and that's saying a lot, right? That's saying a lot. Now, if you don't believe me on this, let's look at what happened when we spent that $830 billion. Do you all remember this? What did Barack Obama promise? If we pass the $830 billion stimulus bill, we will hold the unemployment rate till below 8%. Remember he said that? we're going to hold the unemployment rate below 8%. Then he said, remember this one, we will create 3.5 million new jobs if we pass the stimulus bill. Well, let's just look at the results, okay? Let's look at the results. Did we get 3.5 million jobs? No, in fact, if you look at the unemployment, the number of Americans who are without a job today versus in January of 2009 when we passed that bill, we haven't created 3.5 million jobs. We've lost 2 million jobs. That didn't work out too well. The unemployment rate, did that go down? No. The unemployment rate was 7.8% when we passed the economic stimulus bill. As you know, nationally it's 9.1%, and Christina, what are you, like 10 point, you're over 10% in Illinois now. So it isn't working, right? We need a grand new approach to turning this economy around. On an optimistic note, I'll simply say this. The great thing about America and Americans is that we don't tolerate failure for long. Right? When something is broken, we fix it. That's the most wonderful. Sometimes it's the last option, right? But we finally get it right. And I do believe we're going to get this right. And I do think we're going to fix our tax system. I do think we're going to fix the pension system that you talked about and the legal system. And we're going to get this budget under control. And once we put in place these free enterprise reforms that we've all been talking about today, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see the biggest boom in the American economy and the Illinois economy you ever seen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve Moore. There were some tremendous questions we did not get to. We're going to try and answer those with the panelists and put them up on the website. So if you did not hear your question answered, keep in touch. We all want to keep in touch after this terrific program today anyway. The Kankakee Regional Chamber of Commerce, it's got a table out there. They've got a lot of literature. You don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss the literature that Christina mentioned with respect to the Illinois Policy Institute. They've got a table out there. WKAN Radio was farsighted enough to be a co-sponsor. We thank them for that. We thank, obviously, Olivet Nazarene University and the Family Taxpayers Foundation, led by Jack Roeser. Concluding remarks in one moment from our friend John Tillman. As he walks up here, I'm going to say all of us have been privileged to be here with all of you, to be asked by Jack to come here this afternoon. Now, the privilege shifts to you, because the ideas here are not enough. The action that all of you contribute during the week and the week after and the month after and the year after is what's going to make Illinois, as Christina said, a place that Steve can talk about in great terms. And to lead us to that, let's listen to John Tillman, the president of the Illinois Policy Institute. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to echo the thanks to Jack. I've worked with Jack for a number of years. He's an amazing man. I've toured his facility. It's a great American success story. And thanks to all of our sponsors and all of our panelists. It is a daunting challenge to close following the talent that just was on display here. But I think one of the most talented people here is the good friend of mine who I lunch with regularly. But what a great job by Chris Roebling. Thank you, Chris. We're all so much more well-informed about policy today because of the expertise of the people sitting up here, and it's very important that we do that because policies change lives. Good policies change lives for the better. Bad policies change lives for the worse. And the sad truth is, since January of 2009, both for America and for Illinois, is what we've seen is many, many millions of lives being changed for the worse. We have to work together to change that outcome. And to make that change, we have to face a very hard reality that policies go through a political process. And we also must understand that political victories and losses are not controlled by those of us in this room. They are controlled by the persuadable middle voters who dip in and out of elections every 2 years. And they are persuaded to vote one way or the other by how well we tell the stories about our policies and how they change lives. And it's very important for us to understand that this is a storytelling war going forward, and Liberty lost that war in 2008, but is making some inroads since then. And I think what's really interesting is that the two sides in this fight are clearly defined today more than ever between those who believe in the progressive paradigm and those who believe in the liberty paradigm. Think about the progressive paradigm for a moment. It's an ever-expanding government drawing more and more people into dependency for their food, their clothing, their shelter, their education, and now their health care. Unions draw talented people into their Orwellian grip and limit their upside potential. After all, in a union, all the members are created equal in a terrible perversion of the phrase. The progressive paradigm creates an ever-expanding dependency class who are more and more limited by the dependency ceiling. Of course, you can achieve a baseline of economic security for you and your family, but what you give up is the very essence of freedom and the very essence of the human spirit. This is the progressive paradigm, where the goal is to create a dependency ceiling, locking people in below their true potential in a distorted pursuit of equality. That is what they are selling, and they are winning all too often and for all too long. We're selling the liberty paradigm, the free market paradigm. They want to empower government over people. We want to empower people to pursue their dreams and lift the human spirit. The simple truth is that the free market system and liberty principles are the greatest force for good ever created in the human sphere. I'm guessing all of you are here today because you know that's true. But clearly the world does not know this is true, or we wouldn't see liberty threatened the way it is today. You know, one of President Reagan's great stories is he always talked about that shining city on the hill. America was that shining city on a hill. You know, and that shining city on a hill is an aspirational, uplifting image. And we each fill that in with our own mind's eye when we hear that story from him. And we do that in a very personal way on what that means to us, what America on that hill is all about. You know, that city on the hill represents so many things. But when we focus too much on policy and not enough on the people affected by policy, then we lose sight of one of the most important things about that hill and what it represents. You see, on that hill is the moral high ground of the free market system and the liberty movement. The amazing truth is that the free market ideas are not only the best way to organize society in keeping with the founding principles, our ideas are the best way to help the poor and disadvantaged. And that is our moral high ground that we have to take back. Our ideas are the best way to help the poor and disadvantaged. That is the simple truth that we must tell the people that we know in our spheres of influence over and over and over again. And if we do that, we will win the policy debates and persuade the persuadable middle to vote for candidates who believe in liberty and the free market system. If we take these policy ideas we've discussed today and turn them into honest stories at the very point where policies intersect someone's lives, we will have the ability to change the hearts and then change the minds of those people voting. And that's how we decide elections in a more favorable turn. It's been alluded to by the panel today. We talked a lot about policy, but in the end, policy passes through that political process. You must engage in that political process from this point forward today. You're already engaged by being here, and you have to stay engaged. There's so many things we can do to tell the story about why our ideas are the better ideas than the progressive paradigm, but we often tell the wrong stories and we pick the wrong heroes. The good news is that we have an infinite number of heroes that we can tell stories about policy and how they can change lives. One way for us to do this is take an exercise for a moment and imagine who the progressives would pick as their hero, and then pick them for ourselves. Think about the minimum wage. They love to talk about how the minimum wage helps poor, disadvantaged, and minority people. Think about that video we saw of Jack Roeser's life earlier and those children walking into St. Elizabeth's School. You saw those kids on that video. Remember them walking in? They were 7, 8, 9 years old. Imagine those kids when they're 17, 18, 19 years old walking down a street on the south side of Chicago or the west side of Chicago. If we have a low minimum wage so employers can afford to bring in a new employee who's just learning how to work, developing their skills, trying to get a leg up in life, help wanted signs go out. When we raise that minimum wage to $8.25, as those kids, when they're 17 or 18 and grown up out of St. Elizabeth's, walk down that same street, when they walk by those stores, the help wanted signs are taken away because that employer can't afford $8.25 an hour. And so those kids keep walking, and they get to the corner, and what do they find at the corner? They find a member of the gang offering them a job to be a drug runner. Is that the choice we want to make? Those kids are our heroes on why a lower minimum wage is better, not a higher minimum wage, because it changes those kids' life for the worse if you raise it. It improves their life if you lower it. Make no mistake, we absolutely must regain the moral high ground in the public policy debates. Real people are hurt or helped by how well we fight for what we believe in, for how well each of us become leaders in our own sphere of influence. Steve just referred to this. The thought I want to leave you with today is that each of you, every one of you, can become a great storyteller about the free market system and about liberty. You can learn how to tell stories that tell great stories about liberty in the free markets, and you can start changing people's minds in your own sphere of influence. Not just the people that are already with you. Talk to the people who are not, those surface-skimming, persuadable middle voters. Not only can you do this, I say you must do this. For 2012 is looming on the horizon, and the time to engage is now, which is why it's so exciting that you're in this room today on a Sunday afternoon. 2012 will be one of the most consequential elections of our time. Your engagement, or your lack of engagement, truly matters to change lives. Will Illinois and America choose the progressive paradigm we currently are suffering through, or will we seize the moment and seize the future by choosing the free market liberty paradigm, where we empower people instead of empowering government over people? The answer to that question lies in part with you. Will you join the fight? I hope so, because we know a simple truth too, and that is that when liberty prevails, prosperity surely follows. And not just prosperity of the material kind, though that is certainly good and necessary, but prosperity of the human spirit. That is what America has always been about, and that is what we are fighting for. So let's leave here today. Let's learn how to tell the world the greatest stories ever told about the benefits of the free market system and America's promise of liberty. And if we do that, we will win those fights by putting better people in office who will change the laws of this land and change people's lives for the better. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for our panel, and thanks so much for hosting us here at the university. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's our privilege to have shared the afternoon with you. We hope you feel the same way about us. Thank you very much for coming. Come on up and chat with members of the panel if you wish, but be sure to drive safely through the rain. Thanks so much. We are adjourned.